Alrighty, good evening. We are ready to get going. So it is Monday, April 22nd, 2024. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join into our conversation this evening. We have a special guest who's going to talk with us about the topic of compassion and her research as she looked at it related to college students, but we believe that what she wants to talk about is more expansive and can be related to uh, population in general. So we are very eager to hear what she has to share. But I want to share with you. Normally, I go over a winning strategy um, in advance of um, having a guest come on and talk. And today I want to be do things a little different, and really want to talk with you about a situation that happened for me over the last couple of days that I hope will be something that's beneficial for you to hear about. Um, I think it's often pretty important that um, we recognize that often our ability to attain our personal best is blocked by different people, places, and things that sometimes we have control over, and we put to the side, and we don't address. And recently, a person reached out to me who I had not had contact of any serious way, so probably close to 10 or 11 years. And we didn't leave on the best of terms. And this person had called up to say, "Hey, I want to talk with you about it." And they called to have this conversation at a quarter to two in the morning. Um, and but the conversation pursued, and the person shared their point of view, and I thought it was important for us to have a chance to meet face to face to talk about it. And so my wife and I traveled and met with this family member, uh, 3 hours there and 3 hours back. And about 2 or 3 hours into the get together, I said, I think it's time to go. And the person was like, "No, you're not going anywhere." And so we sat there and spent a couple more hours together. But I must say it was probably the best 6 hours in many decades of time spent to dialogue and to talk and try to resolve some of the issues that were there. And again, I think often we do things that make our existence a little bit more complicated. We have some things that we haven't tidied up, some circumstances that we haven't addressed, and I would encourage you um, to address those things that are possibly lingering, that are holding you back, that doesn't allow you to speak as proudly of yourself and your behavior and of circumstances that you would like to, and address it. Now, to be honest, this person started the conversation. This person made the initial phone call and did the original reaching out. And I think there is, times in which we're going to be the initiators and others are. But what's important is that we meet it wherever it's coming from, and we address it. And I don't know what the future holds for that person or myself, but whatever it does hold, I feel so much better about the current state of affairs and where things are. So I would encourage you to reach out to someone and make that connection, resolve the issue, address the concern. And I said to the person is that your opinion about the circumstance may be different than ours, but more importantly is where do we go from here? We can't go back and change anything in the history, but where do we go from here? And again, I think we left it in a really good spot. There's still more restorative work that needs to be done, but I believe that we're all prepared to do that and in really a good spot to get it done. So again, I encourage you to think about those things that may be holding you back, that you're less than proud of how they went. And again, just to see if there's anything you can do to address it, to leave yourself and others in a better spot, so that we have as least amount of regrets as we possibly can. So that's what I wanted to share with you this evening. I believe that that's the winning strategy, is to address what lies in front of you, to address what you know needs to be addressed, and don't do what I did and wait 10, 11 years. Do it sooner, because we don't know if we have more than that, 10, 11 minutes, 10 or 11 days, 10, 11 months to get it done. So if we're given the energy to do it and the capacity to do it now. So again, the regrets are somewhat limited. So I want to remind everybody that you can call in. On the screen, the call-in number is there. So please consider that as a way to call in and join the conversation. And I'm going to just also allow it to be part of the banner. So that'll come across the bottom. That's not the banner I wanted, sorry. So there's a little bit larger. So you may want to take a screenshot so you can type it in a little bit easier. And I'll also put it in the chat so that you're able to see it if I can find it. Okay, so I'll say to call in. I could spell call in. So some of you may be able to hit that in your comment box. It may be an easy, I think it shows on Facebook and in YouTube that way. So hopefully that works for you. So without further ado, we have Keely that's going to be joining us to talk about her research as an undergrad that looked at the issue of compassion. And so I'll have her join us. So Keely, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So Keely, talk to us a little bit about what you studied, and more importantly, what you found out in your study. So do you mind sharing where you went to school and what your major was?
So I recently graduated in December from East Stroudsburg University with a bachelor's in psychology with a concentration in counseling. And I will be attending Spalding University for my master's in clinical mental health counseling coming this August.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful. So talk to us a little bit about your research and just, if you don't mind, give us a little background as to how you picked out a topic. Was that something you decided, something that was assigned? Was it a collaborative effort with your professors? How did you come to?
So I was part of a private research team, and the research advisor I had created a psychological scale for compassion of others' lives. And he wanted to adventure out to see how it relates and what we can find with the relationship towards compassion towards others. So I wanted to choose mental health. It is very prevalent in our population, particularly in college students. I did college students because that's what I have access to. Mm-hmm. But depression and anxiety are very prevalent. And it's something that people deal with.
Keely, if I can just stop you there for a minute. It would seem like if young people are going off to college, that should be an exciting, time for them, full of, interest and vigor, but you're finding something a little different when it comes to their mental health. Can you talk to us about that?
So college is a little bit idealized when it comes to it. It is a big change. And for those who move and go away from family, it can be a very overwhelming experience in and of itself. you're in a new location with, you may not know anybody, you're completely studying something new, new professors, almost your whole life has changed. So we do realize that kids struggle. And we do try to address it, because usually the most often that you will see students struggle the most is in the beginning of the semester. Usually when they first move in and they're trying to adjust to usually having roommates in dorms, being in a new location, that's when you see they can struggle the most, because it is such a large adjustment for them. They may not have the support if they are not familiar with the area.
So let me ask you a question, Keely. Some parents would think that, or some family members would think, oh, they started school, let's give them some space so that they can adjust, and stay away from them for their first semester or two so they can figure out their own rhythm. Would you say that's a good idea, a bad idea? And I know it's not, you don't want to blanket everybody, but just as a general rule, would you think it's because, as you just said, those semesters are often critical? Um, so what would you say if a family was asking you about their context of their connection during those first semesters? What should they do?
I would not say be overwhelming, but I would definitely say be in communication, particularly if they are going quite a distance.
Mm,
Feel very isolating. And we know that once you isolate, it can become very dangerous very quickly. It is unfortunately quite common to have multiple students commit suicide during
wow.
the first few weeks. And although it is not spoken about, because obviously it's usually kept very private and respect for the family, it is something you have to realize that it can be quite isolating. Although it's great and it's going to change their lives for the better, it can be isolating and it can be overwhelming.
And Keely, I think one of the things that I've learned in working with college students and is that it's a whole different schedule. Before when they left high school, it was very regimented. They had no control, and if they were, my kids miss school, I get an automated call and says, "Hey, your son or daughter is not in school," and but that's not going to happen in college. The professor's not calling them, and it's not calling you. So they really are on their own to figure out their own routine. And again, that can be rather isolating that there isn't anyone hovering over them to remind them. So I think that's what you're talking about, Keely. Am I correct?
Yes, there is a lot of freedom as well, that there is no accountability, and it can be very ground shaking for certain individuals who are used to having that, used to having a schedule. You
Mm-hmm.
are completely self-sufficient at college. You don't have anybody to hold you accountable. It is all on your own. And for someone at 18 to suddenly make that change can be a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody teaches you how to be an adult, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And so, talk more about the mental health aspect as you were researching. You found that was a critically important component.
Yes, so I wanted to look at the overall relationship. I started with just psychology students and I went to the entire campus. I captured about a quarter of the undergraduate population at just under 1,100 students.
Mm.
And I found that higher levels of anxiety and depression were correlated with higher levels of compassion towards others, which is a very interesting finding.
Well, say that again, Keely.
So higher levels of anxiety and depression. So if they indicated they had an increased level of anxiety or depression through their scales, it was correlated positively with higher levels of compassion.
Hmm. Okay,
And when I looked at research, we found that there are a couple
Keely,
different.
I'm a little slow on the uptake. Say that one more time.
So when there are higher levels of anxiety and depression,
Okay.
it is correlated. It has a positive relationship with higher levels of compassion. So when anxiety and depression go up, your levels of compassion towards others also go up,
Wow.
which
Now,
is an interesting
yeah, it's
finding.
very surprising because you would think that which depression and anxiety would shut you down,
Mhm.
but you found just the opposite.
I found the opposite. And when I looked at the literature to see what others had done in college students and the general population, there's a very limited research on depression and compassion towards others. Because usually when we think about depression, we're thinking about self-compassion, how we take care of ourselves. But I think it's very important to analyze, particularly in fields where we're going in to help people,
Mm-hmm.
how we are interacting with the world and how our own mental health can shape that. But
Hmm.
we found with anxiety, people with anxiety have a higher need to belong. They want to create a safe space for themselves. Those friendships where you feel safe. You don't have to worry about anything. And in order to create those safe spaces for themselves, to alleviate their own anxiety, they are compassionate towards others, because that helps formulate the bond. But there's a flip side to that relationship as well. They can become overly compassionate in order to create that safe space, to maintain it as much as possible, to the point where they can become subservient, which is dangerous. Because then you're fueling an anxiety and creating your own cycle of constantly worrying about it and being compassionate to fix it, and then worrying more that it's not enough.
Wow. When you say that, and I think about, I work in the human services field, and when you say that, it really does explain a lot of the human service workers that I have come across, and at times in my own journey have been that person who's really struggling, but at the same time, really trying to be there and support other people. And again, as you said, then beating yourself up that you just can't, give enough, and it becomes a very vicious cycle.
Yes.
Wow.
And it can, I think, especially when talking about in human services, we have this big idea of what compassion is you always hear the word compassion thrown around, and it's really so simple. The definition I used was it's a 3-step temporal process, which essentially means the first step is followed by the second, followed by the third, and it has to go in that order. That you recognize someone's suffering, you empathize with them, and then you act to alleviate their suffering. And that may sound like a lot, but it's as simple as you can see an individual in a wheelchair trying to open a door. You empathize with them. You know that it's a struggle and it's going to be difficult, and you open the door for them. That's considered compassion. And it's something so simple, but in that moment, it can be so life-changing to that one person.
And so you found that there was the correlation. What were your thoughts? What were your takeaways from that research? What do people need to do now that they know that when you are more stressed out and more depressed, that you can potentially care more, but you got to be careful with how that care is exercised. So
Yes.
what do we do now that we know that?
I think establishing boundaries is extremely important, because especially when you are struggling, you may overextend yourself just because you need those spaces where you feel safe and you have support. And don't stretch yourself thin. It's taken me a long time personally to learn that it's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence.
How do you know you're stretched? So are there some signs that a person would look for to know that maybe you're going a little too far?
That you feel overwhelmed, that you feel a little irritable. Little things can sometimes bubble up a little more than you think they should, and that you feel like you can't stop. The moment you feel like you can't stop because you're putting so much on your own plate is a good time to stop and sit back and evaluate. What is really important? Is there something underneath that I need to evaluate? Is there something going on personally that I'm running from? Because people do tend to run from their feelings, and feelings will never be easy. Emotions are very complex and very difficult, and it takes a long time to adjust to them. I don't think anyone truly ever masters their own emotions. But it's important to sit and realize and look at yourself to see what's really going on.
And so, what do you think the role of other people are in a person's life? Sometimes, as you said, you can't see this yourself. What has been helpful to you, Keely, as others are part of your life? What role do they play in helping you to be the best that you can be? Or is it really a responsibility that's primarily yours as a person?
I think to a certain extent, you have to be able to hold yourself accountable, because you cannot be completely reliant on others, because you're setting yourself up for something to go wrong. And unfortunately, when those things do go wrong, it can be very damaging to yourself. It can hurt a lot. I think one of my favorite things is my best friend holds me accountable. He knows that I give myself to research and my studies. And he'll say, you're doing too much. You need to take a breath. You need a night off. You need to go home. He holds me accountable so I'm not running myself into the ground. At one point, I was doing 240 hours of internship as well as 5 classes.
Wow.
And I traveled for research. So I was doing about 60-hour weeks and about 15-hour days. And he would come at 10:30 and say, you need to go home. You've done enough. Even little things, I think, that people forget that means so much to someone who's going through a lot. Checking in, have you eaten today? Did you drink water? Did you take your medicine if you're on any? Did you take a walk outside? Did you take time for yourself? Because at the end of the day, everything will go on. There's always time, but there's never enough time for yourself. Always take time for yourself.
And so that self-care is really important for you to be aware of that.
I think it's critical for everybody, especially. And nobody's self-care will ever look the same way. And I think that's extremely important to acknowledge, because I think there's this idea of what self-care should be. Self-care can be reading a book, doing a puzzle, watching your favorite game for the week. It's little things that you're carving out time for yourself where you don't have to worry about anything else.
And so for some people, that's a coloring book. And yes, they may be, 62, but they like coloring books. And, so don't judge. Just, get the colors, get the crayons.
I'm all for the crayons.
Wow. Again, with any other aspects of your studies that you want to talk about, any other perspectives related to compassion that you want to talk about?
I think one of the aspects of compassion is the understanding of the universality of suffering, is that everybody suffers. And you might never know what someone is going through. During my internship, I was in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. And I've heard a lot of people talk about a lot of very, very hard things I would not wish on anybody. And I think it's so important to stay kind to other people. To if someone snaps at you, they may be having a bad day. Because there's so much going on in everybody's lives. I think it's take a step back if you're upset, but don't take it out on anybody. Speak with kindness, and there's no fault in walking away. That's when I become upset with someone, I will walk away, and I will come back when I kind of sorted through myself. Because it's not fair to take it out on someone else. I think it's very important to be kind and be understanding and meet people where they're at. Because not everybody, even though you may be the same age, the same part of life, they're not at the same point in life. Your experiences have differed. And I think you need to understand that everybody is so different in their life paths.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so, Keely, when you look at yourself and your future, you said you're going to go off to graduate school at Spalding. What do you plan to do after that?
I would love to go on to a doctorate program. I very much enjoy research. I think it is one of my favorite parts of being in a field that we look at what works. We're a research-grounded study. So we look at what works best, and it fuels our practice. And when we notice things work in practice, it fuels our research. So I'd love to move on. I have a particular interest in working with veterans in the future, but I also love to go back and teach at the collegiate level. I have had the opportunity to mentor students through research and as a teaching assistant, and I love to see people grow in that manner. I think it's such a wonderful experience when you see someone understand something and fall in love with what they're doing.
Sure. And why the interest in veterans? Where does that come from?
Veterans, when you look into psychology, we have underserved populations, and we're very well aware, and that's one of our things that we very much try to address. A lot of minority communities are underserved, and it's something that we're very much trying to address in our field, and veterans, unfortunately, are very underserved. And there are different classifications of veterans depending on their experiences in their service, but a lot of them struggle. They may not be accessible to a VA. A VA may not work for them if they have PTSD. I think it's just the adjustment of they deserve the help. They have put so much for us that they should not be an underserved population.
And I also, my limited, work with veterans is, I think they're some of the more private people you're ever going to meet. They really just absorb it and keep it going. They're complaining or narrating the experience is something that is not very common for a lot of them. So they're often as you said, they'll suffer in silence and in isolation, and try really hard not to burden others, even though they've sacrificed so much for our freedom. So trying to be there for them is really hard. I mean, I remember working with one gentleman, and sounds were just something that such a great sensitivity to sounds that it was really hard to understand until I slowed it down and I could understand that sounds were very shocking to his system, um, and great sensitivity. And he would almost become a different person. You could see the face change once he heard something that was loud, especially, and swift with no warning. It really gave almost paralyzed him. But again, that was uh, a byproduct of his service, was a sensitivity to sounds. But I think your point about just being kind and being compassionate, being understanding, judgmental, in the sense of trying to judge resources that they need, not the person, is an important piece that we have to work on as a society. So I want to compliment you tremendously on your studies, especially doing as much as you've done at the baccalaureate level. A lot of the stuff you're talking about sounds very much graduate school, so you are ahead of your time, and I think well positioned to really do some wonderful work in the future. So I congratulate you and wish you the best of luck in what you plan to do in the future.
Thank you. It was wonderful to speak with you. It's been wonderful to be able to discuss something that is so important to us.
Good. And I hope in a year or so, when you're further along, you don't have to wait to graduation, but as you are further along in your studies, please make an overture back to NITSA, and let's try to continue this conversation, because I'm sure you're going to pick up so much, even the first semester or two. So I'd love to check back with you in the near future.
I will definitely be in contact with Nisa. She's a wonderful person.
Again, best of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you've done. Sure.
Thank you.
So wow, such a really appropriate topic to talk about the work that she's doing. And Andrea says excellent work, and Abina says thank you, Keely. And Cheryl has a positive thing to say, but it's about the work is so life-changing, as well as Cheryl saying it's so simple. So again, we wish her the best of luck in her studies and work in the future, and hopefully she's taken this opportunity to pull our coattails for us to be compassionate and kind to ourselves, but to others as well. Just understanding that the role that plays and we play in the lives of other people. So we'll be back together next Monday, which I guess will be the 29th, at 8 o'clock, to continue our conversation on attaining your personal best. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Till then, be very well.